Hello, hello, hello. I am your host OCL, and welcome back to One Century Later. Today, we'll be taking a look at all events from May 23rd to May 29th, 1926. As with last week, all of my sources are in the description down below. Sunday, May 23rd, 1926. The first constitution of Lebanon was adopted by the colonial government of the French Mandate of Lebanon, creating the Lebanese Republic and providing for Lebanon's transition to independence and self-governance. The government was modeled after the French Third Republic, with a president, a council of ministers led by a prime minister, and a bicameral parliament with a chamber of deputies and a senate. Monday, May 24th, 1926. The Mount Tokachi volcano erupted in Hokkaido, Japan at 12:11 p.m. local time. The town of Kamifurano, roughly 24 kilometers from the volcano, was hit with a volcanic mudslide 25 minutes after eruption. The overflowing of the river Kambetsu forced 2,000 farmers to take refuge in the hills. In total, 144 people were killed in the eruption. Also on this day, the Zenkoku Jin, All Japanese National Libertarian Federation of Labor Unions, was founded in Japan as an anarcho-syndicalist organization to decentralize the Japanese trade unions. Lastly, on this day, the Kingdom of Iran extended the Darcy concessions that were signed in 1901 for an additional 35 years. The concessions gave William Knox Darcy, a British petroleum businessman, the exclusive rights to prospect for oil in Persia. Previously, the concessions would have expired on May 27, 1961. With the extension, the concessions would expire on May 27, 1996. Tuesday, May 25th, 1926. Elections were held in the Kingdom of Romania for all 387 seats in the Chamber of Deputies and half of the 115 seats in the Senate. The People's Party won 292 seats in the chamber and the Nationalist Peasant Party won 69. Elections were held for the other half of the Senate seats in June, which is when I will discuss their results. Also on this day, show of force demonstrations were held in Germany as 30,000 members of the Communist Party of Germany met in Berlin and 50,000 members of the Der Stahlhelm met in Dusseldorf. Both demonstrations denounced the British labor unions for failing to improve the lives of their workers under the British general strike. Ukrainian Simon Petlura, the leader of the Ukrainian nationalist movement and Ukraine's president from 1919 to 1920, was assassinated by Jewish anarchist Shalom Schwarzbard in Paris, France. When Petlura was the Secretary of Military Affairs in 1918, his forces massacred thousands of Jews. Schwarzbard accused Petlura of being a killer of his people and shot him point-blank 5 times. Schwarzbard attempted to flee but was caught by the crowd that had formed and beaten. He would have died had the police not arrived. Petlura unfortunately died shortly afterwards in the hospital. And lastly on this day, the Public Buildings Act of 1926, also known as the Elliott-Fernald Act, was signed into law by U.S. President Calvin Coolidge. The act provided $165 million of funding for federal buildings throughout the United States, including $50 million for federal buildings in Washington, D.C., and $100 million for federal buildings elsewhere in the country. Wednesday, May 26, 1926. A cyclone struck Burma, causing a tidal wave flooding villages along the Naf River up to 80 kilometers inland. At least 2,800 people were killed, with thousands displaced and rescue workers unable to assist due to the floods that wiped out communication networks. Following the new constitution of Lebanon, Charles Debbass was elected as the first president of Lebanon by the Lebanese Chamber of Deputies and Senate. During his acceptance speech, Debbass promised to maintain strong relationships with France and make no territorial concessions with Syria. In Hungary, 22 of the 24 defendants on trial for the 1925 forgery and distribution of French francs were convicted. During the counterfeit operation, between 25,000 and 35,000 banknotes were printed with an unknown total franc amount. However, all these sentences given were light, with the longest one at 4 years in prison and a fine of 10,000 gold crowns going to Prince Vindrich Graclaus. The light sentences were partially based on the patriotic motives behind the crime. The vast majority of Hungarians blamed France for the partition of Hungary in the Treaty of Trianon. The Rif War came to an end in Morocco as the leader of the Rif rebels, Abd al-Krim, surrendered to the French general Philippe Pétain in the Rif capital of Targus, Morocco. After 5 years of fighting between Spain, France, and the Rif Republic between 1921 and 1926, between 43,500 and 63,000 Spanish soldiers were killed or injured, between 10,000 and 18,000 French soldiers were killed or injured, and 10,000 ruffians were killed with 20,000 injured. Many of the ruffians killed during the war were civilians through the Spanish army's indiscriminate use of chemical weaponry, torture, and summary executions. And lastly, on this day, the Mark VI exploder, the magnetic influence pistol trigger fitted on the Mark X and Mark XIV torpedoes in the U.S. Navy, was given its first and only destructive test fire. The torpedoes targeted the decommissioned submarine USS L-8 off the coast of Newport, Rhode Island. First attempt passed under the submarine, failing to explode. The second attempt succeeded, splitting the submarine in two, sinking it. The success of the test fire put the Mark VI into production despite several flaws that would not go noticed or fixed until well into World War II. Thursday, May 27th, 1926. Nothing of historical precedent happened on this day. Friday, May 28th, 1926. In the Alipur jail in Calcutta, British India, Bengali revolutionaries and prisoners Ramad Ranjan Chowdhury and Anantahari Mitra killed Deputy Superintendent Bhupendranath Chatterjee. 5 prisoners were charged with the superintendent's murder, but only Chowdhury and Mitra were convicted. Also on this day, General Manuel Gomes da Costa of Portugal attempted to overthrow the Portuguese government of President Bernardino Machado and Prime Minister Antonio Maria da Silva. At 8 a.m. local time, Gomes da Costa began marching on Lisbon with soldiers from the Portuguese army. Along the 360-kilometer march to Lisbon, military units from other cities joined in the coup. Saturday, May 29th, 1926. Princess Elizabeth of York of England was christened as Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary of the House of Windsor in Buckingham Palace. And lastly, the Portuguese military coup that had begun the previous day ended with President Bernardino Machado and Prime Minister Antonio Maria da Silva announcing their resignations. Maria da Silva's resignation was immediate, with Navy Admiral José Mendes Recadas appointed as the new prime minister, while Machado's resignation went into effect at the end of the month. The coup ended without bloodshed and transitioned Portugal into a national dictatorship. That is all. See you next week for all events from Sunday, May 30th, 1926 to Saturday, June 5th, 1926. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.